Early in 1995, Japan was shaken to its core as the Great Hanshin earthquake displaced hundreds of thousands of people and left 5,000 dead in its wake. A scant few months later, the Aum Shinrikyo terrorist group unleashed a gas attack that injured 6,000 people and killed 13. The police went to war with the group that year, arresting the cult's leader. The normally sedate and quiet country suddenly found itself in the throes of upheaval. And in the interest of good taste, we'll dispense with the transition and get right into the shows that came out that year. Brave of Gold Goldron was another one of the Brave series, and the song and dance had yet to really get old. It was one of the few robot shows that had stuck to its roots in the super robot genre, and it continued to work out well for them. The series had altered course once again and steered straight for comedy, featuring a crew of delinquents fighting against an empire full of ninnies who all have bots to get bopped. The series was quite popular in spite of lacking much in the way of story, and kept the Brave series on the air for another run. Gundam Wing appeared on the scene this year, and while it may sound odd to modern ears, it was created with a focus more on melodrama and attractive character designs than it did on the mecha aspects. This brought in women for one of the first times in Gundam history. While there are always women interested in mecha, and especially in aspects of Gundam, the series had now opened up a more prominent space for them. Gundam Wing also successfully condensed all of the original Gundam, Zeta, and Char's Counterattack into a single series, and overall the show worked as a primer for new fans at the time. The series performed well enough in Japan that they had hoped to create a proper sequel for it, but the directing staff declined. When the series aired in the United States 5 years later, it proved to be extremely popular, and received repeated airings for several years. Additionally, it brought Gundam to the West in a meaningful way, and could be given partial credit for the anime boom of the early 2000s. Battle Skipper can be generously called a mecha show, but it focuses more on the girls piloting the robots in the transformation sequences. It was another one of those incidental mecha-style shows that have robots as a plot device and not really the focal point, like most of the other shows featured here. However, it was notable for its extensive use of transformation sequences and flashy fan service that would land it right in line with shows like MD Geist and Genocyber. Galaxy Fraulein Yuna, more properly called Galactic Lady Legend Yuna, don't ask me where they got the Fraulein from, started its OVA run. Very much in the style of a magical girl show, the series also focused heavily on ridiculous comedy, as opposed to overly heavy action. The character designer for this series, Mika Akitaka, was involved in the production of the original MS Girls image set, which formed the basis of their involvement on the original video games that the show was based on. As a matter of fact, Yuna's character design is based heavily on the F91 design that Akitaka did, and that ended up getting the ball rolling on the game series. The property was more popular as a video game, but the OVA was successful enough to get another spin-off in the following year. It was brought over to the States by ADV Films as one of their early pickups. Sailor Victory released its first episode, and it was not exactly what one would call the pinnacle of the genre. While it did have some interesting character designs, it would never be more than a pair of peculiar episodes. The OVA was the kind of one-shot pitch that had fallen by the wayside at this point, and it featured cute girls and ninja robots in the primary means of combat. It suffered heavily from a lack of any real focus, but the series ended up in the States under the Anime Works label just like Battle Skipper did. Neon Genesis Evangelion began airing this year. In spite of being plagued by production issues, the series made an indelible mark on the mecha genre and created a wealth of copycats in its wake. The series follows reluctant pilot Shinji Ikari as he takes on creatures called angels in his mecha called an Evangelion. This does not do the story any justice as far as explaining its depths, but needless to say, for whatever opinions may prevail in the series, it has a penchant for surprisingly rich characters even in our modern era. The series does have some very noticeable flaws in the animation department, and the imagery can get bogged down in itself, but the show did deconstruct and change the game for the genre. By the end of it, budget constraints had forced it to move into a very avant-garde mode of presentation to finish the story, but it did what the director was aiming for, to an extent. Finally, Ghost in the Shell released in November of this year. This seminal work broke boundaries in a number of ways, first by introducing Major Motoko Kusanagi as the protagonist. While she may be traditionally attractive, she's also fearless, dangerous, and often brutal, attributes not often given to female protagonists at this time. Second, while the film gave way to long screeds of philosophizing, the very tactile world that Major Kusanagi lived in felt all too real. The near future that the Major lives in has many parallels with the modern world. Additionally, the symbolism is present, but not overwhelming. This is another Mamoru Oshii work, and his plotting style fit the tone of the film extremely well. The movie would gain infamy and be brought stateside in 1996, patiently waiting on shelves at video rental stores in anticipation of an audience that could appreciate its subtleties, which it got in the early 2000s. The genre was going through a series of refinements as the world continued to rush towards the new millennium, and the next year would show off what it had in store. The fusion era would continue, and women would be more attracted to the genre by the offerings in the next year, and in 1996 we will see one of the most important fusion works to come out.